In old pre-Islamic Yemen before the 7th century, there were many wonders, and the oldest and most celebrated was Ghamdan, the citadel of Sanaa. It is described as a huge edifice of 20 stories, each story 10 cubits high. The Ghamdan, 4 facades, were built with stone of different colors, white, black, green and red. On the top story was a chamber, which had windows of marble, framed with ebony and plain wood. Its roof was a slab of pellucid marble, so that when the lord of Ghamdan lay on his couch, he saw the birds fly overhead, and could distinguish a raven from a kite. At each corner stood a brazen lion, and when the wind blew, it entered the hollow interior of the effigies, and made a sound like the roaring of lions. Qasr Ghumdan, or Ghumdan Palace or Castle, was, depending upon definition, the world's earliest example of a skyscraper, sitting in the middle of the city of Sanaa, the current capital of Yemen in the past. Now nothing but a ruin, where only traces of the foundations are left, and a small part of the gate to the palace remains as a reminder of the greatness of this once mighty palace. A palace that was a possibly 7 to 20 story high-rise building, 7 to 10 stories at the lower estimates and 20 at the higher estimates. And the entire length of the tower, its height, might have been taller than 100 meters, which is 330 feet. At the higher estimates, but probably above half that at 50 meters, though the full 100 meters and 20 stories are possible if certain types of stone, like the compacted volcanic rock that was used in the base foundations and was common in the area, were used, and the 20 meters squared at the broadest estimates of the base of the tower are used. The existence of Ghumdan Castle with these dimensions are less an impossibility on a purely engineering level, and more that the sources disagree regarding the measurements of this castle. The medieval Arabic historian Hamdani said that the castle was 20 stories high, whereas Yaqut al-Hamawi, another medieval historian and geographer, wrote the following: Ghumdan sabatu suqufin bayna kulli saqfayn minha arba'un dhira'in. Ghumdan is of 7 floors. Between each 2 floors are 40 arm lengths. It should be noted though that these 2 medieval historians are hundreds of years after Ghumdan Castle was destroyed. And if we want to get to other sources that are close in time to Ghumdan Castle, then we will have to look at ancient pre-Islamic Arabic poetry, with, for example, Jawad al-Himyari saying that the length of it in a verse in his poetry is Ashrin Saqfan Samkuha La Yaqsur, 20 stories whose broadness of floors and ceiling are never too little. The issue with using poetry as a source though is that poetry, by its very nature, likes to embellish the language and embellish various stories and things told in the poetry. So the poetry might have exaggerated the grandness of Ghumdan Castle. Yet what we know about Ghumdan Castle is that it was a large square-formed tower. Some reconstructions make it round, but neither the remaining foundations at the base nor the various sources describing the tower support this idea about it being round. And it was a tower with a lot of adjoined buildings around it, and it stood in the middle of the city of Sanaa in pre-Islamic times. So it was not a castle far away from the city, but in the middle of it. The entire complex, and not just the tower, covered an area of 500 by 300 meters, or about 150,000 square meters, and probably had an even bigger garden area and other buildings, whose foundation have not survived to this day. Though, since the castle was also inside the city, and we have actually noticed buildings that might have not been palace buildings being inside the area of the palace grounds, it might have been kind of mixed in with more regular buildings that were not part of the palace too. But in any case, the palace grounds were among the largest palace complexes, if not the largest. For comparison, the entire palace area of imperial Roman palaces on the Palatine Hill in Rome was about 150,000 square meters, including Domus Flavia, the biggest palace of Rome, and all the other palaces together, were about the same size as the palace area of Ghumdan Castle, and even with the more modest estimation of the tower being about 50 meters, it was the tallest palace building ever built at this time, and the only buildings that were higher than it were some of the pyramids in Egypt. But who built this absolutely massive castle or palace? Al-Hamdani, in the surviving fragments of his book Al-Iqlil, The Crown, claims that the first stones in the foundation of the structure of the palace of Ghamdan were laid by the hands of Shem, the son of Noah, and finished by the Sabaean monarch Li Sharha Yahdib, who lived in the 8th century BC, who is said to be the father of the Queen of Sheba according to Arabic mythological tradition. Al-Hamdani's account about Ghumdan Palace seems to be more mythology than history. Other accounts and sources point towards Sha'r Autar being responsible for having created Ghumdan Castle. He was a king that controlled the area around Sanaa during the 1st century BC. He was also said to have built the city walls around the city of Sanaa. So building Ghumdan Castle could have been a natural extension of just having a lot of building projects done in Sanaa. Yet other sources point towards his main rival, the last great Sabaean king, Al-Sharih Yahdib, being responsible for building Ghumdan Castle. Modern historians and archaeologists date Ghumdan to be around the turn of the millennium, so these two figures would fit as being possible candidates for having ordered the construction of Ghumdan Castle. Going back to the appearance of the castle, the building, the main tower, had 4 sides, one of white stone, another of black stone, a third of green, and a 4th side of red stone according to Al-Hamdani. Other descriptions in other sources include layers, with each story being made of differently colored rocks. Other accounts about Ghumdan do not describe the tower as multicolored at all. The coloring could also just be names given to the tower. For example, around Sanaa existed structures known as the White Palace, Al-Qasr al-Bayda, and the Black Palace, Al-Qasr al-Aswad. And these weren't actually those colors of black and white. They were just names given to them. And the same could be true for Ghumdan Castle, when a floor is, for example, referred to as As-Saqfu al-Ahmaru, the red floor. Though the various sources do agree at least on some details regarding the tower. For example, at the top of the building was a room with a ceiling coated by white marble and containing a large glass fanlight. This type of decoration is believable, as ancient buildings in both southern Arabia and northern Arabia used to use not only ceramic tiles but also precious stones, glass and quartz, together with gypsum powder, basalt and other plastering compounds in their architecture. So this sort of ornament is not out of the ordinary, and neither is a glass fanlight. There are also a lot of other descriptions that are kind of wild. These also include descriptions of beautiful court halls and various mechanical apparatuses that were present in Ghumdan Castle, natural sound creating contraptions, natural ventilation systems, and a gigantic water-based clock. The mentionings are sparse with the details though in the various sources. Yet regarding a natural ventilation and cooling system, there are holes and gaps in the Ghumdan Castle's foundational stones that could indicate a sort of cooling usage. In any case, Ghumdan Castle, for all we know, was a very lavish castle fit for the great rulers of southern Arabia, and made possible by the great wealth that existed in the area. due to the trade that flowed through the area. A trade that was truly enormous by most estimates, and was part of the Ethiopic-Yemeni-Indian Triangle Trade Network. Something which I have described and talked about in 2 videos. Links are in the description about both this trade and the city of Sanaa. Speaking about trade, the palace was not only a royal palace, but also a military fortress. And the meaning of the name for the city of Sanaa is actually fortified in Sabaik, the local language that was used back then. And Sanaa was a fortified city that overlooked the vital trade routes coming from the south. And Ghumdan Castle was just the ultimate fortification of Sanaa. The Ghumdan Tower in the middle of the city was the last line of defense if the city walls that surrounded the city were breached. Archers standing in the tower would be raining down arrows upon invaders as they tried to breach the gate of the tower or the walls of the tower. Walls that were almost as thick as the protective walls of the city in order to support the height of the towers and to connect the tower to all the other buildings of the palace. On the subject of archers and soldiers generally, one of the possible reasons as to why outside of the main tower the Ghumdan Palace area was so big is that it served as a military base of operation, possibly a training or staging area for various campaigns and garrisoning of guards for protecting the trade routes near the city of Sanaa. Ghumdan Castle thus served double duty as both a fortress for military matters and a royal palace. Military buildings and fortifications serving double duty was not something uncommon in the area, as for example the Qasr Ghumdan, a castle near Sanaa in which the Himyarite kings who ruled the areas of Yemen before Islam were buried, were also used for military purposes, in addition to being a graveyard of sorts, or necropolis as they would say in Greek. And speaking about dead and being a remnant of something now gone, what remains today of Ghumdan Castle are just parts of the foundation and parts of the gate to the palace area. So today the castle is long gone and destroyed, but the question is, when was it destroyed and by whom? And here once again the sources are conflicting regarding who is responsible ultimately for having destroyed Ghumdan Castle. Some claim that Ghumdan Castle was destroyed by Uthman bin Affan, who would become the 3rd caliph in Islam during the 7th century, and this was due to Uthman, after having conquered the city of Sanaa and having to put down a group of warriors that used Ghumdan Castle as their fortress. He decided to destroy it permanently, following a recommendation from Omar, who would become the 2nd caliph of Islam. The other ones claimed to possibly be responsible in the sources is abʿah al-Habashi, the viceroy for Yemen under the Aksumite Empire during the 6th century, who is said to have destroyed Ghumdan Castle when the Aksum Empire, an empire I have made a video about, also check it out in the future, tried to conquer the Arabic peninsula, and the castle was destroyed in the siege of Sanaa. The pre-Islamic Jaahili poetry is closer in time and says that the Ethiopians were responsible for the destruction of Ghumdan Castle. Thus I think that this is a much more likely explanation, that abʿah and the Aksumites are responsible, though it is possible that the castle was rebuilt and then destroyed again in the Islamic conquest of Yemen, or just partially destroyed by the Aksumites, and Uthman just finished it almost a century later. What is known is that Qasr Ghumdan was a beautiful structure which is mentioned several times in poetry, and I will here recite some of it. More specifically, poetry from ذو يدن الهمجاري. فغمدان الذي حدثت عنه بنوه مسمكا في راس نيك بمنهمة وأسفله جرون وحر المغخل اللفيك السليك مصابح السليط طلوه فيه إذا يمسي كطو ماض البروك ونخلة التي غرست إليه يكاد الجسر يخسر بالأدوك فأصبح بعد جدته رمادا وغير حسنه لهب الحريق. And Ghumdan, as I told, they built well and thick at the top of the mountain chain. At a carpentry site and below it was the grinding, polishing and the heating of the sticky, slippery, muddled wall. Lamps of stinging light like the lightning had passed, were alight inside of it at once whenever it turned night. And that palm that had been planted at Ghumdan, pleasant circumstances, were about to push forth the dates. And so, after its once novelty, it has become ashes, and flame of fire has not done its beauty well. Ghumdan Castle, a tower said to be reaching paradise, that is referenced a lot in Arabic poetry for its splendor and beauty, being beyond compare, but also referenced as a symbol of a long lost time and lost glory. This is Ghumdan Castle, and this has been my video about it. I hope you enjoyed it.
Please do subscribe, as it would help the channel spread awareness about the humanities.
اشتركوا بالقناة من فضلكم.